Hello, we're starting today with the Arte de series. So this week we're going to be looking at several different Spanish artists. So today we begin con el arte de Diego Silva y Velázquez, or better known as just Velázquez, Spanish painter of popes and kings. So we see a portrait of Velázquez here. This is a self-portrait he made of himself. This is typical clothing of the 1600s for someone in his stature, which would have been a middle class court painter. So he's wearing his Chamberlain's clothes that you see there. This particular painting was done in 1645. So let's jump in with the life and times of Diego Velázquez. And so Diego Velázquez was born in Sevilla around 1599. In Sevilla is where he learned to paint. And early on in his life, he moved from Sevilla to Madrid. With a letter of recommendation in hand in Madrid, he was able to begin painting. Eventually, he will paint for the royal court of Felipe IV. He's going to take 2 trips to Italy, and he's going to grow as a painter in Italy as he studies Renaissance Italian art. One of his biggest influences is Caravaggio, and we'll talk a little bit more about Caravaggio in a few minutes. He will return to Spain, to Madrid, and he will work the rest of his life in the court of Felipe IV, which we'll meet in a few minutes, and he will die in Madrid on August 6, 1660. So the first painting we're going to look at is called Vieja friendo huevos, which translates old woman frying eggs. And I will bring this painting back in a few minutes, but I want to take a look at this quote by Keith Christensen relating to Caravaggio. And he says, Caravaggio pushed the figures up against the picture plane and used light to enhance the dramatic impact and gives the figures a quality of immediacy. So how does that relate to this particular painting? What is your opinion? How does Velázquez use light and shadow in this particular painting? I'd love to hear what you think. Great, thank you for your input. And we're going to bounce back out and talk a little bit about the times in which Diego Velázquez lived. And so this was a time of great strife, of violence. It was also a time of great artistic works. And so right before you see Diego Velázquez being born, he was born into a Spain that was defeated by the English in the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588. This was a great blow politically and economically for Spain. It is the beginning of the end of their empire. He was born during the 30 Years' War, and this was a terrible war, probably the worst in human history, where more than 8 million people perished, not just from the war, but from plague and violence that was going on during that time. In 1640, Portugal is going to overthrow the Spanish authority. So you see again Spain losing more and more ground, losing more and more influence. The painter in the court of King Philip IV of Spain is where Diego Velázquez is going to find himself. He will become their premier court painter, and he's known as a portrait artist of the Baroque period. And so closing off this section on his time, let's talk about portraiture art because it was very popular during this time. And in this particular quote, it says that hints of personality are especially evident in 17th century portrayals of less exalted persons, such as Velázquez's picture of his assistant Juan de Pareja. And so you see Juan de Pareja in this painting. He was his assistant painter. He was also a slave. And so what can we glean about Juan de Pareja's personality from this painting? Please give me your opinion. I would love to know. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. So let's move back out and let's take a look at this last painting in this section. I wanted to add this one because it speaks to not just the life and times, but also to Velázquez. This is called The Surrender of Breda, 1635. In this particular painting, we see two figures in the center. It depicts the exchange of the key of Breda from the Dutch's possession to the Spanish, and is considered one of Velázquez's best works. What sort of makes this stand out is that normally during this time, you would see the conqueror, usually on a horse, and overlooking the person he's conquered and the people he's conquered, and he's in glory. In this particular painting, Velázquez brings both of them down, eye to eye, face to face, very different for their particular times. And so, very interesting sort of look at the person of Velázquez and how he added his own ideas to his particular work. So now let's look at some more works by Velázquez. Before we get to his magnus opus, let's take a look at this particular portrait. It is of Felipe IV. This is the king of Velázquez's employ. This king is best known for his rule over Spain during the 30 Years' War, which we just talked about. He was a member of the House of Habsburg, which was an old Austrian royal line. That facial feature, the nose and the lips, is a genetic trait of the Habsburgs. He was married off at the age of 10 to his 13-year-old cousin, Elizabeth of France. And they only had one son, Balthasar Charles, who dies at age 16 in 1646. In 1649, following the death of Elizabeth, he's going to marry Maria Ana, or Mariana. She is almost 30 years younger than Felipe IV, and she was his niece and daughter of the Emperor Ferdinand. They were married in order to strengthen the relationship with Habsburg Austria. Mariana is going to give him 5 children. Only 2 are going to survive. And so the one that becomes a favorite is La Infanta Margarita, is the daughter that survives. 1653 is this particular painting. She's going to be a favorite subject of many paintings during her short lifetime. You see her again in this particular painting called La Infanta Margarita in a blue dress. This is considered one of his greatest paintings, 1659. And the last painting I have on here also speaks to the idea of painting lesser personalities. This is a court jester or buffoon named Sebastián de Morra, who bears at least in my opinion, passing resemblance with an actor from the Game of Thrones. Can you tell me who he seems to look like? Eerily, in my opinion. The last one we're looking at here is actually considered his magnus opus, his greatest work, Las Meninas, the girls. And so there's a lot of talk about this painting, and it's one of my absolute favorites. We have here, first of all, painting of a royal scene. So you see La Infanta Margarita Teresa. She's right in the middle of this. Some people say, well, this is a painting of Margarita Teresa. The only problem with that particular idea is there is Velázquez. He's not looking at Margarita Teresa, he's looking out from behind his canvas. So who is he looking at is the question. And so going back to his Italian period, the idea of Renaissance art in perspective, this painting is very much about perspective. Who is he painting? And so in the background, way, way back, to give us more of an idea of the depth of this painting, is one of the court chamberlains. And he's coming out, He was in the room, he's leaving, and he stops to look back and glance, see how far away he is. And so one of the ideas here is that he's painting the king and queen. That idea comes from, if we look at the mirror, you see there's Felipe IV and Mariana. Now, the only problem with that is this painting was never painted. There was never a portrait like this of Felipe IV and Mariana. And so who is he painting? And so one of the hints is this particular window here, where again we talk about light and shadow, and there's a light coming through the window, and the angle of the light, at least in the opinion of art critics, tells us that he's not painting the king and queen because they're not standing in front of him. In fact, they're going to say that according to the open window, the reflection comes from the king and queen standing off to the side. And so the last and more interesting theory is that, and let's zoom back in at Velázquez, is who is he looking at? Well, again, perspective. The viewer, you and I, are in the painting. Now, first of all, before I go any further, this painting, if when you see it in the museum, is not just larger than life, it is enormous. This is the size of a wall. And so it's painted so that the person looking at it feels like they're actually in this room. And so again, we go back to perspective, shadow, and light. And so I find it an interesting theory that Velázquez, in a last way of immortalizing this painting, immortalizes the viewer throughout time. So every person that stands in front of this painting and looks at it is actually part of this painting. And so the viewer becomes the subject. Tell me what you think. If you believe this is true, is it interesting? Can you back it up with facts? I'd love to hear your opinion. And so this wraps up this particular section on Velázquez and the painters of Spain. Have a great day, and I hope you enjoyed this. Read up on this, look up some more information. Let me know what you find. Let me know what you think of Diego Silva y Velázquez. Have a great rest of the day.